words, pray, hope, and don't worry, those are the words of St. Padre Pio. It is my honor to be here with you and this exhibit of St. Padre Pio. He came to know many people in his confessionals, in letters and in confession, and he made many people a saint.
Many are on their way to be made saints. People, priests, religious nuns who were very close to Padre Pio. He demanded from them to go to confession once a week, scolding them when they forgot, prompting them to acquire virtues and to love the Rosary.
He was following them like a shadow, watching them even from afar. If they called on him, he would listen. We are now presenting some saints, some blessed, some venerable, all those who were attached to Padre Pio. The most famous and well-known, Pope St. John Paul II.
He had visited San Giovanni Rotondo and went to confession in 1947. When he was Pope in 1987, visiting his tomb, the Pope asked Padre Pio for a miracle for one of his friends in Poland. Padre Pio said, "I cannot refuse that." She was cured and lived a long life. Here we have the Pope visiting the Padre Pio's hospital, giving communion to Sister Agnes, cured by Padre Pio. Visiting the hospital and ready to make Padre Pio a saint, he asked Padre Pio which wound was more painful. "The wound of the shoulder," Padre Pio answered. Jason Everett wrote a book on Pope John Paul II. Saint John Paul the Great, His Five Great Loves. The Pope did not become a saint, but a great saint, under the promptings of Padre Pio. Please read his book, How to Become a Great Saint.
St. Paul VI, Pope. He consulted with Padre Pio and attended his Mass, calling it a retreat mission.
But in the beginning, he was against Padre Pio because he presented religion as sweet and not meat. However, the Pope had issued the Humanae Vitae, the encyclical that defended life, and Padre Pio wrote to the Pope, thanking him for his words, clear and decisive in the encyclical. The Pope had been Archbishop of Milan, where the Duomo is a centerpiece of beauty.
Blessed Pius XII, he was the Pope of World War II. He consulted with Padre Pio and said he was a saint, as did
Pope Paul VI. He held Padre Pio in great esteem. He encouraged people to go see Padre Pio. The Pope called the hospital a magnificent success and gave Padre Pio, though still in the vow of poverty, the total administration of the hospital.
Padre Pio had a vision of Pope Pius VII in heaven when he was very sick. Padre Pio offered himself his own suffering in place of the Pope, and the Pope got better.
But Padre Pio suffered terribly. The Pope inspired Padre Pio to start the prayer groups that are now formed throughout the world.
Servant of God, Father Daniel Natale, a Capuchin, he was healed by Padre Pio. Padre Pio appeared to him the night before he was to have surgery for cancer. He said to him, "Do not be afraid, all will go well."
Padre Pio had the gift of bilocation. Padre Pio appeared to his father in the U.S. He moved his father from outside the house into the living room where he died.
Padre Pio had a great esteem for Bartolo Longo, who was a former worshiper of the devil, converted by the Rosary of Our Lady of Pompeii. He later cared for orphans and built a very beautiful church to Our Lady. He encouraged people to pray the Rosary. Padre Pio gave him a rose, which to this day is still fresh. Venerable Gemma Giannini. She took the name Gemma because Saint Gemma Galgani visited her, shown here in white. She visited Padre Pio, wrote to him for direction, shown here in one of her visits. Padre Pio and Sister Gemma had mystical experiences. She said that Sister Gemma and Padre Pio were always helping her prepare for receiving communion. Venerable Father James Lornia. He was instructed by Padre Pio to become a priest and a Dominican.
He became pastor of St. Paul Basilica in Venice, since he had a great devotion to Blessed Imelda, who died during Holy Communion because of her intense love for Jesus. He founded an order of sisters named after Saint Imelda.
Servant of God, Sister Mary of Jesus Crucified. She lived near where Padre Pio lived, in the city of Foggia. And Padre Pio said to her, "It is the will of God that you finally begin a new congregation, the Sisters of the Sacred Heart, in Naples, Italy." Venerable Joseph Marella. He had been suspended for 16 years for helping an excommunicated priest, but Padre Pio suggested he start a house for the abandoned children. His work was blessed. Servant of God, Sister Frances of the Blessed Sacrament. She went to see Padre Pio, and he told her that he would help her in the new foundation of the Franciscan Sisters Adorers.
Padre Pio told her that the sisters must be innocent like a child.
Servant of God, Henry Medi. He recited the Rosary for all the people who came to the funeral of Padre Pio. He was a great friend of Padre Pio. Later, he was elected to the Italian Senate. He defended God as the great designer of the universe, and that all is directed by God. Venerable James Gaglione. His wealth was important to him. During his illness, he went to see Padre Pio, who cured also his soul. He founded an apostolate to comfort those who were sick. Later, he donated all his money and property to the poor. At his funeral, there was a miraculous shower of rose petals.
Beniamino Gigli, the Italian opera singer, came to San Giovanni Rotondo, drawn by Padre Pio's fame of holiness. During his first meeting with this holy Capuchin friar, he was asked to end an affair that was unknown to anyone, that he had just begun outside his marriage. This was the spark that brought about his conversion. Gigli would often return to Padre Pio, who would be moved to tears when he heard him sing Mama, a popular song of the time.
We now have Father Louis, who will sing in place of Ernie Grimm.
Mamma, solo per te la mia canzone vola. Mamma, tu non sarai più sola. Quanto ti voglio bene, queste parole d'amore che mi sospirano il cuore, forse non tornano più. Mamma, solo per te la mia canzone sei tu. Tu sei la vita e per la vita non ti lascerò mai più. Mamma, mai più.
Italia Betti, the Red Passion. Italia graduated in sciences from the famous University of Bologna, started teaching, loved to talk to young people, but she became a fervent communist, believing that the red flag had the solution to all the problems. So she dressed up in total red, got a red motorcycle, put on the back a red flag, and went throughout the region shouting with passion, preaching communism. She was an atheist. She went up to San Giovanni Rotondo, shouting toward the monastery where Padre Pio lived. But one day, Padre Pio came out, told her that she was acting like an animal. She converted, went to confession, and lived near Padre Pio. Italia went on to live a very saintly life. Carlo Campanini. He was an actor and comedian. When he went to see Padre Pio in 1939, Padre Pio met him and his friend Marlo in the plaza. Upon seeing Padre Pio, Carlo smelled carbolic acid that choked him. The strong odor was a sign that the person was in grave sin. After confession, Padre Pio asked him to change his life, to go to confession. Padre Pio gave him a rosary and asked him to pray it often. He made a promise that he would never abandon Carlo. Carlo went to Mass every day and gave up immoral movies, dirty jokes, and profanity.
Maria Bizio was in charge of washing Padre Pio's clothing. She also made pillows and gloves for him.
She noticed blood on his pillow, which was from his wounds, and did not want to throw the water away because it smelled of roses. Eventually, she donated gloves and a pillow to the Padre Pio group here at Our Lady of the Rosary Church in San Diego. Our Lady of Purity. This painting hangs in the room of Padre Pio, in front of his bed. Maria Bizio, who took care of the washing of Padre Pio's clothes, said, Padre Pio shed many tears night and day just looking at this painting.
Maria Pio, known as Little Americana, came to San Giovanni Rotondo in 1923 and lived there for 40 years.
She became a Third Order Franciscan and wore only the brown habit. She was very beautiful and very humble. She became a school teacher, played the organ in church, made hosts for communion, and visited the sick. She built a seminary in Prechelcina, the location where Padre Pio said he once heard angels sing. Her pink house near Padre Pio's monastery became well known. She died at the hospital of Padre Pio and was buried there in San Giovanni Rotondo.
Luisa de Martini was the